Hello, students. This is Miss Cone here. I'm going to talk to you today about In Cold Blood, sort of give you an overview of some of the things I'd like you to know and introduce you to the annotation process. I've talked to you about mood. All right, so our learning goals for this unit of study are we're going to learn about Truman Capote and his famous true crime novel. We're going to closely read and annotate In Cold Blood. We're going to learn specifically about mood, symbolism, characterization, and author's purpose. With this book, there are 4 parts. In each part, we're going to focus on one of those terms. We're going to analyze and discuss the book with your classmates. You're going to create a quote project featuring one of your best annotations from parts 1 or 2 of In Cold Blood. And you're also going to write a timed literary analysis essay where you practice and develop the literary analysis writing skills you were taught in Unit 1. All right, so a little bit about In Cold Blood. Truman Capote was very proud of himself. He called it a work of creative nonfiction. It's very much written like a novel, a fictional novel, but it's based on a true story. Although I think you will find Truman Capote probably took some liberties in terms of elaborating and exaggerating some of the details for effect. It's not written in chronological order. Some students find that challenging. It jumps around quite a bit. And it's also told from alternating third-person limited points of view. So the first part 1 focuses a lot on the Clutter family. And then parts 2 and 3 focus more on the killers. And part 4 is its own sort of beast. I don't want to tell you too much until you get there. A little bit about Truman Capote. Outside of the video, he was born in 1925. His best friend was Nell Harper Lee. You should all know what she wrote, which was To Kill a Mockingbird. His novel was first serialized in The New Yorker in 1965. The New Yorker is a magazine. It's the one with the famous social and political cartoons on the front cover. It's one of my favorite magazines. And to serialize something means it's broken down into parts. So that's probably why it's broken into the 4 parts. This is his most famous novel. It really made him famous. And again, unfortunately, Truman Capote was quite the partier and had quite the nightlife. And he died in 1984, which would have made him pretty young when he died. All right, this is the article that was in the New York Times that piqued Capote's interest and made him want to learn more about this family and why they were murdered for apparently no seemingly good reason. In Cold Blood, hence the title of the book. So he went to Kansas and started researching and learned a lot about the Clutter family and the killers, Perry Smith and Dick Hickok. Let me introduce you to the setting and some of the characters. It happened in Holcomb, Kansas, which is very, very, very close to Colorado. It is on the western side of Kansas. This is the Clutter house. This is where the family was murdered. Again, here are some of the family members. There were 6 of them. 4 of them were killed. The 2 oldest daughters, Beverly and Ivana, they were, and I don't know which one is which, they were not living in the house at the time, so they were not killed. But Herb, Bonnie, Nancy, and Kenyon, were teenagers when they were murdered. So this picture is a little old, but so those four of the 6 Clutters were murdered. The 2 who were no longer living in the house were not. Herb Clutter is the head of the household. He is well liked. He's a farmer. He's a very respected member of the community, and he's pretty prosperous. Bonnie Clutter is his wife. She's kind of a recluse. She keeps to herself. She's dealing with some mental illness. Nancy is the 3rd daughter of the Clutters, and she is very popular, well liked, dating a young chap named Bobby Rupp, and she certainly is sort of the town darling. Everybody loves Nancy. Kenyon is their son. He is more like his mother. He's quiet and reserved, enjoyed working with his hands. He was 15 years old when he died. Nancy was 17. All right, here are the killers. That's Perry Smith. That's Dick Hickok. They met in prison on a first stint. Once they got out, and that's when they murdered the Clutters. All right. He met Dick in prison, like I said, on a first stint in jail. He was convicted thief. He met him in a Kansas State Penitentiary. All right. Dick learned about the Clutter family from a fellow inmate named Floyd Wells, and that's when he started concocting a plan to rob the Clutters. All right, the investigators. Alvin Dewey is the main detective and investigator. He is an acquaintance of Herb Clutter. All right, so as you're reading, okay, you're going to look for Capote's use of literary terms and rhetorical devices and annotate these in your book when you see them. To annotate something means to mark it up. All right, so you're going to mark up literary devices when you see them, and you're not just going to identify terms, okay? You're going to say something about them. If you're not comfortable writing in your book, I can give you some post-its to annotate, all right? But annotation is a really important AP skill, all right? It keeps us active while we're reading. Good readers and writers, they mark things up when they're reading. They think about things more deeply when they're reading. They comment on what they're reading. So you're going to be annotating the book, okay? And those annotations are going to come in handy for the quote project. Later on, they're going to come in handy for your writing assignments and the timed writing, and they're going to come in handy for discussions we're going to have in class about the on Canvas about each part of the book. So you really need to annotate your book. I would say for each part, aim for 10 annotations, okay? And when you're annotating, like I said before, you're not going to just identify lines as this is an example of theme or this is an example of mood. You're going to say something about it. For example, you might zoom in on how Capote uses certain word choices to help create a certain mood. You might comment on, here is an example of where a theme is illustrated, and say what theme is being illustrated and how. Okay, so you're not just identifying. You're going to take notes in the side margin about what it is you're identifying. Okay, so definitely I'm going to be collecting annotations for grade periodically in discussion, so it's important to annotate as you go. Okay. Again, the annotations will also help with quote project and will also help with the timed writing. So make sure you're annotating not only what we discuss in class, but your own thoughts about the book. All right, so what can you annotate for? All right, the ones that are highlighted are going to be our focal points of each chapter or each part. Okay, the first part, we're going to focus on mood. The second part, we're going to focus on symbolism. The third part, characterization. And the last part, author's purpose. Okay, but there are a lot of different things you can annotate for. You can annotate for simile, imagery, metaphor, symbolism, mood, theme, tone, irony, allusion, personification, foreshadowing, diction, character traits, characterization, syntax, or author's purpose. Okay, some of these are going to be terms you don't know. Most of these are terms you probably know, but my guess is you don't know what diction is, which is a fancy name for word choice, and syntax, which is a fancy name for sentence structure. Those are two AP type terms that you're going to be using probably quite a bit next year. So I wanted to make sure I introduced them to you this year. The rest, my guess is you probably know. If not, make sure you become familiar with these terms, and these are good terms for you to annotate the text for. All right, so what is mood? Mood is the overall feeling or atmosphere in a text. How do writers create mood? They create mood by carefully selecting their diction or word choices. They use imagery and figurative language and other devices to create mood. Sometimes they even vary their sentence structure in order to help create a certain mood. Use varying sentence structure. So today, what I'm going to do is I am going to model the annotation process with the first paragraph of In Cold Blood with a focus on mood. Okay. And then paragraphs 2 through 4 we'll sort of work through together. Okay. And then you're going to complete the You Do annotation worksheet on your own to show me that you know how to annotate a text and answer a question about mood. Okay. So that being said, let me go ahead and click on paragraph 1 here. Okay, so the first paragraph of In Cold Blood reads like this. I'm going to read through it with you, and then I'm going to sort of model the annotation process. Obviously, that's going to be hard to translate on the computer, but I will show you certainly what it looks like, although you'll be writing it in your book versus typing it on the computer. Okay. So, first paragraph reads, the village of Holcomb stands on the high wheat plains of western Kansas, a lonesome area that other Kansans call Out There. Some 70 miles east of the Colorado border, the countryside, with its hard blue skies and desert clear air, has an atmosphere that is rather more far west than Middle West. The local accent is barbed with a prairie twang and a ranch hand nasalness, and the men, many of them, wear narrow frontier trousers, Stetsons, and high-heeled boots with pointed toes. The land is flat, and the views are awesomely extensive. Horses, herds of cattle, a white cluster of grain elevators rising as gracefully as Greek temples are visible long before a traveler reaches them. I feel like there is a certain mood already being created here. And I feel like there are certain word choices, really, that Capote is using here to create a certain mood. And if I think about what word choices stand out to me and are sort of related, I think of the word lonesome. Okay, so I'm going to make a comment about the word lonesome. Okay, lonesome is a word, is diction that lends itself to word choice, or to mood. Yes, to helping Capote create mood. So if I were handwriting my annotations, I would write that in the side margins of my book. I feel like another word that's sort of another word that sort of is related to lonesome is far west. Far west seems to be another word choice that lends itself to helping Capote create mood. Again, I might write that in the side margins if I were actually writing it. The views are awesomely extensive. I feel like that is related to lonesome and far west. The phrase awesomely extensive also seems related to lonesome and far. To lonesome and far west, and seems to help Capote create a mood. Okay, so I've got some words like lonesome, far west, lonely, awesomely extensive. Okay, so I feel like I can sort of using those word choices probably interpret the mood. So I feel as though Capote is creating a lonely, isolated, or lonely and isolated mood using particular diction such as lonesome, far west, and awesomely extensive. So a lot of times when I am looking for mood, I will look at word choices a lot. I think the word choices and diction, a lot of times writers will use that to create a certain mood. Um, and I will look for words that are sort of related. Yes, lonesome, awesomely extensive, and far west give me this feeling of a lonely, isolated town. Yeah, because he's really describing the setting here and creating a certain mood. And a lot of times in in setting, writers will help establish a certain mood. Yeah. So I feel like he's painting Holcomb as a lonely and isolated sort of town. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at paragraphs 2 through 4 of Ink or Blood. We're going to read those together, and we're going to see if Capote continues this mood and how he does it, and think about the lonely, isolated mood, and see if he continues on with that. We're also going to see what else we can tell about the book. All right. So Holcomb too can be seen from great distances. Not that there's much to see, simply an aimless congregation of buildings divided in the center by the main line tracks of the Santa Fe Railroad. A haphazard hamlet bounded on the south by a brown stretch of the pronounced Arkansas River, on the north by a highway, Route 50, and on the east and west by prairie lands and wheat fields. After rain or when snowfalls thaw, the streets, unnamed, unshaded, unpaved, turn from the thickest dust into the direst mud. At one end of the town stands a stark old stucco structure, the roof of which supports an electric sign, Dance. But the dancing has ceased, and the advertisement has been dark for several years. Nearby is another building with an irrelevant sign, this one in flaking gold on a dirty window, Holcomb Bank. The bank closed in 1933, and its former counting rooms have been converted into apartments. It is one of the town's 2 apartment houses, the second being a ramshackle mansion known because a good part of the local school's faculty lives there as the teacherage. But the majority of Holcomb's homes are one-story frame affairs with front porches. Okay, let's see here. I think to continue Capote's sort of feeling of Holcomb creating this mood of Holcomb being sort of this lonely, isolated, alienated place, can be seen from great distances. Okay, so the use of the words great distances also helps continue the lonely and isolated mood. I also feel like something that stood out to me is this unnamed, unshaded, unpaved. Okay, so let me hit comment there. Cody's syntax here helps. Syntax with the sentence structure also helps create a certain mood. The unnamed, unshaded, unpaved. Again, if you've got unnamed streets, you've got unshaded streets, you've got unpaved streets. You think about a hot town that doesn't have street names and they're not paved. Holcomb's out there. Yeah, it's a lonely and isolated town. Okay, and contributes to the so that syntax tactical structure there, the with the omission of the any kind of conjunction there helps create the mood as well. So we get lonely and isolated mood. So it's not just the word choice, it's the fact that the conjunctions there are eliminated that helps create the mood. It's the syntactical structure there. So to me, I feel like that's kind of important. Yeah. But again, this imagery here, the imagery of the building that used to be a dance studio or maybe a club, all right, but that the dancing has ceased and it's been dark for several years, also creates sort of this lonely and isolated and alienated ghost town sort of mood that is Holcomb. So the imagery of the building that used to be a dance studio or club helps contribute to the lonely and isolated mood. So he's sort of continuing that mood of loneliness and isolation, alienation. Yes, Holcomb's out there, but it's also pretty peaceful. Yes. All right. Down by the depot, the postmistress, a gaunt woman who wears a rawhide jacket and demons and cowboy boots, presides over a falling apart post office. The depot itself, with its peeling sulfur-colored paint, is equally melancholy. The chief, the super chief, the El Capitan go by every day, but these celebrated expresses never pause there. No passenger trains do, only the occasional freight. Up on the highway, there are 2 filling stations, one of which doubles as a meagerly supplied grocery store, while the other does extra duty as a cafe, Hartman's Cafe, where Mrs. Hartman, the proprietress, dispensing sandwiches, coffee, soft drinks, and 3.2 beer. Holcomb, like the rest of Kansas, is dry. Okay, again, I think using the imagery of the trains, yes. Capote uses the imagery describing the trains that never stop there with passengers, just freight, to help create the lonely, isolated, and peaceful mood. Okay. All right. Let's see if he continues this mood. And that really is all, unless you include, as one must, the Holcomb School, a good-looking establishment which reveals a circumstance that the appearance of the community otherwise camouflages, that the parents who send their children to this modern and ably staffed consolidated school, the grades go from kindergarten through senior high, and a fleet of buses transport the students, of which there are usually around 360, from as far as 16 miles away, are, in general, a prosperous people. Farm ranchers, most of them, they are outdoor folk of varied stock, German, Irish, Norwegian, Mexican, Japanese. They raise cattle and sheep, grow wheat, milo, grass seed, and sugar beets. Farming is always a chancy business, but in West Era Kansas, its practitioners consider themselves born gamblers, for they must contend with the extremely shallow precipitation. The annual average is 18 inches and anguishing irrigation problems. However, the last 7 years have been years of droughtless beneficence. The farm ranchers in Finney County, of which Holcomb is a part, have done well. Money has been made, not from farming alone, but also of the exploitation of plentiful natural gas resources, and its acquisition is reflected in the new school, the comfortable interiors of the farmhouses, and the steep and swollen grain elevators. Okay, here they're getting a little bit more. Capote's getting a little bit more into the people and what we can tell about the town and the people. But I do have to say, and that really is all. Yeah. Okay. He's painting again using this language to paint a mood that is sort of lonely, isolated. Yes. Peaceful kind of town. That's Holcomb. Yes. And he's creating this overall feel that Holcomb is that. And I think he's adding to it a little bit here. Okay. I think he's also suggesting that Holcomb has a sense of pride in two things here: farming, yes, and the school. And so those are the things that you can tell that they've taken care of. Yes, the school is a handsome establishment, I think he calls it, a good looking establishment. Yes. And they also have steep and swollen grain elevators. So there's a sense of pride in the farming, which is their primary source of income, and that, perhaps these people are prosperous, yes, because of the farming. And what they take pride in is the school. So a lot of times with setting, okay, setting is often used to establish mood and reveal a little bit about characters and people and whatnot. Yes. So here we know that they're prosperous people. Yes. And we know the people of Holcomb in general are prosperous, and that they put the money they make into schools, and they're farmers. That's how they get their money. Okay. But again, you think of farms, you think out there, lonely, isolated, peaceful. Yes? Okay. So now what your job is to read the last paragraph, okay, in cold blood. And you are going to give me 3 annotations in the last paragraph, okay? I want you to do it in your book, and I also want you to do it in the comments, okay, on this worksheet. All right, you'll find this worksheet in the assignments, and then you're going to answer this question, okay, about mood, yes, in the after annotating and reading this last paragraph. How would you describe the mood shift in this paragraph? How does Capote create the mood shift? Okay, so again, so far he's painted Holcomb as this lonely, isolated, and peaceful town. He shifts from that to what? Yes, and then you're going to cite evidence for support. You're going to use the race strategy to answer this question. Race is a good strategy to use to answer short answer questions in class. Okay, it's good to use on standardized tests as well to answer short answer questions. Most of you have probably heard of this strategy before, where the R stands for restate the question, A stands for answer with accuracy, C means to cite evidence from the text, and the E means to expand and explain essentially how the evidence, yes, answers the question. Okay, the last paragraph of of the first 5 paragraphs in Cold Blood. The 5th paragraph, okay, reads like this. Until one morning in mid-November of 1959, few American, in fact few Kansans, had ever heard of Holcomb. Like the waters of the river, like the motorist on the highway, and like the yellow train streaking down the Santa Fe tracks, drama, in the shape of exceptional happenings, had never stopped there. The inhabitants of the village, numbering 270, were satisfied that this should be so, quite content to exist inside ordinary life, to work, to hunt, to watch television, to attend school socials, choir practice, meetings of the 4-H club. But then, in the earliest hours of that morning in November, a Sunday morning, certain foreign sounds impinged on the normal nightly Holcomb noises, on the keening hysteria of coyotes, the dry scrape of scuttling tumbleweed, the racing, receding wail of the locomotive whistles. At the time, not a soul in sleeping Holcomb heard them. 4 shotgun blasts that, all told, ended 6 human lives. But afterward, the townspeople, theretofore sufficiently fearful of each other to seldom trouble to lock their doors, found fantasy recreating them over and again, those somber explosions that stimulated fires of mistrust in the glare of which many old neighbors viewed each other strangely and as strangers. Okay, you're going to annotate this. Give me 3 annotations, 3 things you want to mark up. Okay, and then I would focus on mood, at least for some of those annotations. And then you are going to answer this question using the race strategy. This is an assignment. All right. This is to show me that you know how to annotate a text. Okay. And then your job within Cold Blood, as you're reading through part 1, as you're really reading through all of the book, is to annotate 4 different literary terms, and not just identify, but to say something about them, like we did in the side margins and like I've modeled here. And again, you are going to be using these annotations for the project that's coming up. You're going to be using these annotations for the timed writing. You're going to be using these annotations for weekly discussions. So you need to annotate the book because it's going to help as you're reading, because it's going to help you later on. And you don't just have to annotate for some of the terms that I on the slide in the slideshow. You can also ask questions in the side margins. You can also point out connections to other texts that you've read. You can point out real world connections. You can point out personal connections to your own life. You can make predictions. There are lots of other kinds of annotations that good readers do that you are also welcome to mark up your books for. But again, you want to annotate quite a bit. I would say if you don't have at least 10 annotations per section, you're probably not gonna have enough to work with for the quote project or the final paper that is a timed writing. So the more you annotate, the easier that paper is going to be. Again, this section's focus is mood, so you want to definitely make sure you make a few annotations on mood as you're reading part 1. But again, you should also be annotating for other things because that's what good readers do. Thank you. Hope this helps.